This edition of Monocle on Saturday was first broadcast on the 22nd of June 2024. Hello, I'm Georgina Godwin, broadcasting to you live from Midori House in London. This is Monocle on Saturday. Coming up on today's programme, we'll have a look through the week's news and culture with author and political journalist Terry Stiastny. Then,
others peek into a well to see a glimpse of their future spouse, or wallow naked in a meadow to bring better fortune to their love life. So, lots of drinking, naked magic spells, and the never-ending night. You see where this is going.
Indeed we do. Monocle's Helsinki correspondent Petri Burtsoff explains how the Nordic countries will be celebrating the beginning of summer. Plus, we'll have a look ahead to Monocle's Swiss summer market. Alex Herrmann, UK and Ireland Director of Switzerland Tourism, joins us to talk about how we're bringing midsummer to Midori House. That's all ahead here on Monocle on Saturday. First, here's the news. Israeli forces pounded Rafah in southern Gaza on Friday, as well as other areas across the enclave, killing at least 45 Palestinians as troops engaged in close-quarter combat with Hamas militants, according to residents and Israel's military. Residents also said the Israelis appeared to be trying to complete their capture of Rafah. Ukraine's air defence shot down 12 of 16 missiles and all 13 drones launched by Russia in an overnight attack, the Ukrainian Air Force said. The Russian air attack, the second largest strike this week, targeted critical infrastructure facilities in different regions of the country, the Air Force said. And Japanese Emperor Naruhito and his wife begin a week-long visit to Britain today, visiting Oxford University where they both studied and attending a formal banquet with King Charles. But there are no plans for a meeting with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. The official reason for the trip is to celebrate the long ties between the two royal families and to demonstrate the deep relationship between Britain and Japan. And that's your Monocle Radio News. Hello and welcome to Monocle on Saturday. I'm joined now in the studio by the author and political journalist Terry Stiastny. Good morning to you, Terry.
Good morning.
Terry, how's your week been?
It's been quite busy. I've been following the UK election campaign quite a lot, which it's strange. It doesn't seem to have really taken off. There have been lots of debates, lots of arguments, but not very much seems to have changed during the course of the campaign, but sort of certainly keeping me up and keeping me busy following it.
Well, I'm waiting for some great policy announcement, which doesn't seem to come. But what has happened, of course, is that we've got news of these NHS hackers, Russian hackers, and they're causing absolute mayhem within the government hospitals.
Yes, I think this is the kind of issue that, is going to be really important for whoever is the next UK Prime Minister and no doubt for other leaders around the world. But because it's quite complex, you don't tend to hear much discussion about it. But this is really worrying. This is a story in The Guardian this morning saying the UK government weighs action against Russian hackers over NHS records theft. And basically, what has happened here is that one of the big hospitals and sort of healthcare trusts in London, so Guy's and Thomas's Hospital, which, really big teaching hospitals in London, lots of patients, and this affects lots of people in part of London. It's caused serious disruption for 7 hospitals. And you can imagine, in a busy city where there are already lots of people waiting for treatment, this is a really big deal. And the government is considering, it says here, striking back against Russian hackers. And they have stolen 300 million patient interaction records. So that's not 300 million people. That's the record of 300 million times that people have seen a doctor or got a test. And this includes things like people's blood tests for HIV, for cancer. And the hackers, the ransomware gang, have put some of these records online. So they've made these public, and understandably, lots of people are very worried about what has happened to their data. And worse, a lot of people have been locked out. The companies that provide things like blood tests have been locked out of their own systems, so they can't carry out the blood test on lots of patients. So this is having a really bad effect on people. But the question is, how do we deal with this? Because it's, I think it's about 9 months ago now that the British Library had a similar cyber attack. And obviously there, people's lives aren't at stake. It's not their health that's at stake, but, it's a huge access to sort of huge amounts of information and knowledge that's there. And they're still limping back from that, and still all the services aren't available. So, this kind of hacking has huge effects on huge numbers of people.
The article says that the government wants to strike back, but there's no detail here. I mean, how?
Well, yes, exactly. The question is what that means. And sort of reading through the article, it seems to be basically that the National Crime Agency, it says, will try to take retaliatory action, but that basically seems to involve trying to take this information back down off the internet. The interesting thing is that there was a reported ransom of about $50 million. Now, nobody in the UK has wanted to pay that, because obviously they think you don't want to start paying ransoms to hackers, because that will only encourage people to do this more. They're trying to remove the data from the internet, but then it's possible that they've got copies of it and it will just sort of pop up again somewhere else. So, but what do you do against these ransomware gangs who are based often, it says, in Russia or former Soviet states, and they do have operations against a lot of these ransomware groups? There's a description here of trying to seize the command and control of one of the ransomware gangs, but it's but this has to be done internationally. So you've got to work with the FBI, you've got to work with Europol, and this is obviously hugely complicated.
And it's going to be a massive problem for whoever is the next Prime Minister. And of course, we don't know that. One thing that we do know for sure is it probably won't be Rishi Sunak. It also probably won't be Nigel Farage, particularly in light of the comments he's just made. Lots of headlines everywhere where he's claiming that Russia was provoked into the war with Ukraine.
Yes, well, this is interesting. Interestingly, so far in this election campaign, foreign policy hasn't really been much of an issue. We've been hearing mostly about domestic tax policy, mostly about, the records of everybody's predecessor. But Nigel Farage was asked in one of a series of BBC interviews about his previous views on Russia. And he was challenged on his views of the invasion of Ukraine, his admiration for Putin. And he said, although he disliked the Russian president personally, he admired him as a political operator. He said this a while ago. And then he said, we provoked this war. Of course, it's his fault. He's used what we've done as an excuse. And of course, not surprisingly, this has been pounced on by Nigel Farage's opponents. So James Cleverly, the current Home Secretary, saying that he was echoing Putin's vile justification for the brutal invasion. We've had Labour saying that these comments are disgraceful and Farage would rather lick Vladimir Putin's boots than stand up for the people of Ukraine. So this is kind of a rare intrusion of foreign policy into the British election, but possibly not in a way that is going to help Nigel Farage and reform.
And of course, there's another country where we don't know who'll be leading it very, very shortly, and that's France. Agnes Poirier, who's a frequent guest on Monocle Radio, has written this opinion piece in which she says the French Republic teeters as voters embrace hard right and left. And of course, she points out in this article that it was an absolute shock that Macron called this election, that perhaps he should have reflected for a little while after the European parliamentary results. But she also says he was just being very French.
Yes, I think this is a really interesting one, because the sort of the chaos of the French election so far has been quite hard to keep up with. You've had a leader of a party sort of effectively locking himself into the party headquarters while everybody else is trying to get in through the door, trying to bash the door down, and he's saying that he owns the party and the others don't. And so all of this is kind of very dramatic on a day-to-day basis, perhaps in a way that British politicians are probably quite relieved that they're not doing this. But Agnes Poirier is taking a bit of a longer view of this in the Times this morning. And I think, it is fascinating. It was fascinating to look at, how Macron has the presidential photographer who follows him around and has these amazingly kind of close-up pictures. And there's a picture of him holding the meeting in the Elysee where he basically says, I've decided to call an election. And Attal, the Prime Minister, has kind of got his face in his hands like that. And I think that was the first that he knew of it. And that's that actual moment captured where it's like, what on earth have you decided to do? But yeah, Agnes Poirier is bringing up some really interesting big questions here as to what the potential outcomes are in France. And she is saying there's 4 scenarios. So you could have potentially a hard right majority. So you would potentially have Jordan Bardella as the prime minister and having to cohabit
and he's not
with Macron.
He's 30, is he?
He's 28. Yeah, and people thought he would have a while before sort of the presidential election where he could potentially be the candidate instead of Marine Le Pen. You know, is he going to do this job? He said he doesn't want it unless he actually gets a majority. I think you probably don't want the job necessarily anyway. You know, is there going to be a hard left majority, a Republican front majority, which would mean that Macron has to kind of appoint a national unity government? Or do you just end up with, you know, nobody really in charge and sort of constant sort of this chaos kind of carrying on until the next presidential election? So, you know, it's difficult to see what Macron's game plan was with this. Was it just to sort of try and show that the far right can't actually run things very well, which is one theory that was going around? But that's really high risk, because if you put them in a position of authority, they could always say, oh, well, we could run things well. It's just the president is trying to block us from doing things. So, yeah, it's going to be really interesting to follow this, you know, as we go into the first round next weekend, and obviously the second round after that, where you could get a lot of, as is pointed out here, lots of very odd individual circumstances where you have different parties against each other in different combinations.
And just as Paris is gearing up for really the biggest event of the 4 years, which is, of course, the Olympics, which is going to flood the city with tourists and people coming for the Games. Another city which is complaining about being flooded by tourists is Barcelona. They're going to ban apartment rentals.
Yes, we've seen a few cities around Europe wanting to crack down on short-term rentals, because they're saying that, you know, I think partly because they see the tourist industry as taking away from hotels and the traditional tourist industry. But Barcelona, the city's mayor, is saying that by November 2028, Barcelona would scrap the licenses of 10,000 apartments because he believes that this is driving up the rents for people who live in the city, and the cost of the housing has gone up. Young people aren't able to access housing. But of course, you know, on the other side of this, there are a lot of people who are presumably doing quite well out of renting out their apartments, and the tourist industry is presumably doing quite well out of this. But the number of visitors to Barcelona has still been going up. But a lot of local residents aren't very happy about this, it seems.
Now, somebody else who's been doing quite well, although actually not through any work of her own, but through inheritance, is this Austrian, I beg your pardon, Austrian heiress. Her name is Marianne Engelhorn. She's the millennial member of one of the richest families in Austria, and she's giving away her money.
Yes, this is really interesting. So Marlene Engelhorn has been looking at doing this for quite a few months now. She's only 31, I think it is. So it's obviously quite a while until she would expect to be handing on her money. But she points out that she's inherited a fortune from her grandmother. She's going to give away 25 million euros of her inheritance. And because Austria abolished inheritance tax apparently in 2008, she decided to set up a system where they would create effectively like a committee to decide how to redistribute this money. And so lots of people in Salzburg could apply to join the committee. They don't just get to keep the money for themselves. So it's not like, you know, you just join this and you get, you know, €500,000 to do what you want with. You have to give it to a good cause. So they've divided this up to 77 different groups. But it was kind of a deliberative process, I suppose, that 50 randomly chosen citizens of Salzburg, and they met for 6 weeks to decide what kind of causes to give this money to. So they've given it to things like nature conservation and a homeless charity and think tanks and women's shelters. But she obviously very much feels that it is not fair that she inherited this large amount of money. And she says basically that if the government's not going to redistribute it, then I'm going to do that. that instead, and I'm going to, the citizens have to deal with it themselves. So if politicians don't do their job and redistribute, then I have to redistribute my wealth myself.
Highly commendable. Terry, thank you very much. I hope you're going to stick around because our Swiss summer market opens to the public in 45 minutes. And so that means you've got 45 minutes of browsing and you get
Will there be cheese?
There will be cheese and you get to look at everything before everybody else. Excellent. So privileged view. Go and wander around the market. It looks like it's going to be a beautiful day here today. A little bit cloudy this morning, a little bit of rain overnight, but I think it's going to be absolutely glorious. So do stick around, and listeners, if you are in London, why not come and join us? We'll be talking more about that in a little while. Now, this weekend is also special in the Nordic countries as it marks the biggest celebration of the season. That's midsummer. The Finns, Swedes, Danes, Norwegians and Icelanders all have their own ways of celebrating the summer solstice. But the celebrations always include unique foods, music and dance, as well as some rather peculiar beliefs. Here's our Helsinki correspondent, Petri Burtsoff, telling you how he and his fellow northerners celebrate midsummer and what this age-old tradition means for the region.
Picture this. It's a warm summer night and the sun doesn't set until midnight. Adorned with colorful flower crowns on their heads, people hold hands and dance barefoot around a tall pole draped in fresh birch leaves and summer flowers. Someone plays the accordion and people sing songs about the eternal summer and the nightless night. This is how my family and countless others across the Nordic countries celebrate midsummer, the highlight of the summer season for most of the region's 27 million inhabitants. The music and the songs that you're hearing are my actual recordings from our island home in Ekenäs in the southern Finnish archipelago. And the music and dance are just some of the rituals that mark this celebration that lasts several days. Midsummer is also about food. Typical dishes include new potatoes with fresh dill, pickled herring, cured salmon, and of course, strawberry and cream cake. The food is accompanied by drinks called the snaps, which come in various flavors but are usually distilled herbal liquors, the most famous of them called aquavit. When drinking the snaps, it is customary to sing snap songs together, which are songs written for this purpose only and are usually playful songs about summer and the sea. The most famous one is called Herrmann, which encourages you to down your first shot of snaps, because otherwise the song goes, you won't even get a half pour the next time around. You get the idea, there's a lot of drinking. Midsummer is a tradition that dates back all the way to the Iron Age, and as such has pre-Christian pagan roots. It therefore involves some magic and spells that people who are not from the Nordics might find amusing. For instance, some people place birch twigs next to their door or flowers under their pillow to increase fertility. Others peek into a well to see a glimpse of their future spouse, or wallow naked in a meadow to bring better fortune to their love life. So lots of drinking, naked magic spells, and the never-ending night. You see where this is going. Although the midsummer is a quintessentially Nordic tradition, there's a degree of variation across the Nordic countries on how people celebrate. Lighting midsummer bonfires to ward off evil spirits is more popular in Norway, Denmark and Finland than in Sweden and Iceland, for example. The Danes even put witch puppets and sometimes also fireworks on the bonfire, which is something that you don't see elsewhere. The Norwegians, for their part, eat a traditional sour cream porridge called rømmegrøt. They also take the bonfire burning a bit more seriously than the others, often placing old boats filled with flammable materials inside the bonfire. The biggest ever bonfire in Norway was 4 to 7 meters high, when in my native Finland the bonfires are often just a bit larger campfires. The Finnish tradition follows the Swedish one very closely. After all, Finland and Sweden were one country for 600 years, but there is one major difference: the sauna. For most Finns, a midsummer without a sauna is unimaginable. We often bathe in the sauna until midnight, taking refreshing dips in the sea or in the lake, and beating each other with fresh birch twigs. It's actually nicer than it sounds, take it from me. And then there's Iceland. They take the magic part one step further, believing that cows can speak and that seals can turn human. And if that's too conventional for you, listen to this. The Icelanders believe that if you sit at a four-way crossroads long enough, all your wishes will come true at midnight. I guess traffic slows down during midsummer, all around Iceland. All of this, the bizarre traditions, the age-old magic and the white nights, must feel somewhat exotic, even odd, to most of the people listening to this show. But for those of us who live in the Nordic countries, midsummer is one of our most cherished traditions. It's a celebration of summer and the sun in a region characterized by long and cold winters, a rite which marks the official beginning of the summer holidays. And the magic and the spells, while borderline ridiculous, are an important part of it. They are something that people in this part of the world have done for thousands of years and remind us of the powers, real or imagined, of the natural world. So see you at the meadow at midnight, wear flowers on your head, and nothing else. For Monocle in Helsinki, I'm Petri Burtsoff.
Thank you, Petri. I'm very glad to tell you that Alex Herrmann, who's UK and Ireland Director of Swiss Tourism, is not wearing flowers. He is, however, wearing clothes. Thank you for doing that, Alex.
You're very welcome.
What are the Swiss traditions for midsummer?
We don't really celebrate midsummer that much. I mean, it's the start of the big summer season, the festivals, the mountain resorts, everything really kicks off then. There is, however, a similar festival. I just heard the correspondent talk about bonfires and things like that. There's a big festival in Zurich happening always in April. It's called Sechseläuten. It's a very traditional thing that's been coming from the Middle Ages. It's basically a snowman, a cardboard snowman. No real snowmans have been harmed in this. Cardboard snowman that is on a huge bonfire, which is lit at 6 o'clock. That's why Sechseläuten, that's the name. And it's part of a huge celebration for the full day. And then the story goes that depending on how long the snowman is burning until the explosives in the head explode, if it takes a long time, it will be a bad summer. If it takes a very short time, it will be a great summer.
And what was the result this year?
Well, so this year, historic, hundreds of years, this has always been a big celebration. Now this year, it was so windy in Zurich that they were not allowed to burn the snowman. And the snowman is actually burned this week only in a different part of Switzerland. So we will know in a couple of days how the summer will be.
But I gather, looking at the Swiss weather and speaking to people who just flew in from Zurich yesterday, it's pretty grim there.
I happened to be in Switzerland for most of the week. It was absolutely fantastic weather, but it turned on Thursday and it got pretty wet the last couple of days. But it's improving.
The sun is shining here, and of course we have our own festival today, which is our Swiss Summer Market, and it's organised and sponsored by your company, which is of course which is Swiss Tourism. Just start by telling us a little bit about Swiss Tourism and your Ireland and UK office.
Yes, so we are the Swiss National Tourist Office. We're based here in London, Holborn. We promote Switzerland to the UK travellers. We talk about what's new in Switzerland, what's different in Switzerland. We also try to talk about not just the highlights of Switzerland that most people know. We talk about surprising Switzerland, different aspects of Switzerland, which is one of the reasons why we're absolutely thrilled to work with Monocle on this. We can show urban Switzerland. We can show parts of Switzerland that are not yet very well known. We can also talk about different seasons. You know, I've been living here for 5 years. I still get, Switzerland, great winter sports, fantastic. Yes, that's absolutely true. But there's so many other things you can do in Switzerland in the winter, but also in the rest of the year, in autumn, for example, or even in summer in the mountains. This is a trend that we're seeing, that the mountains, the Alps, the Swiss Alps have become much more popular also in the summer.
Because they are glorious at that time.
It's glorious. It's a great place to go for families. It's there's this new trend called coolcation. People try to get away from the heat in the summer, so they might go to the Mediterranean earlier or later in the year, but through the summer they go to the Nordics, for example, or the Alps, because they can expect cooler temperatures, which are still nice and perfect, but in the night it cools down. And it's just a perfect time. I do it with my family every summer. It's just an amazing holiday.
Yeah. Now, we've both walked in and it's absolutely bustling outside. All the stall holders have arrived. They're getting ready. They're setting up. The bunting is flying. There's lovely smells coming through the air. I believe the sheep, the special black-faced sheep, are now in their little pen. So tell us about the Swiss summer market today.
I actually happened to be in the room next door just a moment ago, and I saw the sheep marching in. They're all ready for the visitors. They're one of many highlights here for the entire family. We have partners from all over Switzerland. So, for example, our colleagues from Zurich are here. They bring some products from very sustainable products made in Zurich. With them, but they also, of course, talk about the city of Zurich, which Monocle obviously knows very well as well. But also the city of Basel is here, also with some very attractive products. But once again, also experts here to talk about Basel and the many things that can be done there. And the same for Geneva. Geneva brought a company called Canonica. They have chocolate tasting. So there's, of course, no Swiss market without chocolate tasting. Also some activities for kids. And then with chocolate comes cheese, obviously. It was mentioned earlier in the program. The Bernese Overland is here with quite a number of people from different parts. And they have an amazing cheese tasting with a local company here, Yumi Cheese, some Swiss cheeses. But they also brought an artist who does paper cutting, a very traditional art in that part of Switzerland, in Gstaad, in that area, Adelboden, etc. And then Switzerland has an Italian-speaking part, which many people don't know. And we have people here from Lugano, the city of Lugano. They're talking about their region, bring regional delicacies, wines from their region as well. And then Ascona Lugano is here with experts about the Lugano Film Festival, which always takes place in early August as well. And then finally, two other partners I don't want to forget, obviously, you have to get around Switzerland somehow. We recommend the train and public transportation. So we have colleagues here from Travel Switzerland. They brought a Wheel of Fortune. Attractive prizes can be won. And Swiss, our national airline, they brought a paper plane game. So you fold your own paper plane, you have to hit the target, and then you get attractive prizes. And then finally, we have some people here from Zermatt, from the Hotel Omnia, and the designer furniture company USM, and they do a whiskey tasting with Swiss whiskey, and they talk about Swiss hotels and hospitality.
We had a bit of a preview last night. There was a VIP party here, and I kept going up to the cheese thing, saying, I just need to be quite sure that that's the cheese I like. And having more and more little slices of this wonderful peppery cheese with this great rind that you can eat. It was absolutely gorgeous. I also noticed there was a perfume company here, Odor.
Yes, I only mentioned now the half of the partners. Always there's other partners here, a bookstore, many other companies that have a connection to Switzerland and that complete this market. It's an amazing time. I think people, like you, Georgina, I tried everything last night. I looked at everything, and I saw the guests do the same, and everybody seemed to really enjoy the evening.
It was such fun. And there was another thing I saw, which I've never really seen before, which was, I sadly forget the name of the company, but I'm going to haul them onto the radio at some point during the day today to find out more about this bag in which you put your towel and your shoes and everything. You go for your swim, you go to the body, but then you float with your bag, and so you don't have to go back there to pick up your stuff. You just take it with you. I think that's genius.
Yes, it's a genius product, but it's also it kind of signifies and is an example of summer life in the Swiss cities, which is a lot of it is outdoors, and a lot of it revolves around the lakes and the rivers, and all of the cities that are here. Most of the cities in Switzerland are either on a lake or on a river, and the cities on the river, they came up with this very, very smart idea because people want to go for a swim. The rivers are clean, the water is lovely, but then, of course, you drift with the river and you don't want to walk all the way back and you can't swim back. So they came up with this waterproof kind of bag that you then wrap around yourself, and it's on one hand a floating device, on the other hand it is something to keep everything, and people put their imagine that people put their mobile phones in there even. They really trust this product. It's completely waterproof, and they float down the river, and then so they don't have to walk around naked.
We're back to naked again. That seems like a good point to close, I think, before we go any further on that. But listen, throughout the course of the day, I will be getting in various of those people that you've been talking about, and we'll be telling you more about the market. That's if you're not in London. If you are in London, well, why don't you come and see for yourself? It would be lovely to meet you. We're all here all day, longing to meet listeners, and so much to do and experience at our Swiss market here at Monocle. Thank you so much for coming in to speak to me, Alex. That's all for this edition of Monocle on Saturday. Thanks also to our producer Mariella Bevan and our studio engineer Sam Impey. Many thanks to my guest Terry Stiastny and the man we've just heard from, Mr. Switzerland himself, Alex Herrmann. Monocle on Saturday returns next weekend. I'm Georgina Godwin. Thank you for listening.